Welcome to Stonewall Farm, Maine. We're Sam and Kim. Over the past 30 years, we have been busy raising our daughter and son and pursuing our careers, but something was missing. Now, at age 50, we decided to sell everything and move to the country to chase our dreams of raising our own food and living a simpler life. But simpler doesn't always mean easier. Join us as we bring this neglected homestead back to life. So this year on the homestead, we raised 2 pigs. We bartered half of one of the pigs out with a gentleman that we get our firewood from to help kind of offset some of the cost in raising them. We'll get into how we raise pigs in other videos and so forth. One of the big things though we did do differently this year was instead of bringing them off-site to have them processed, we had someone come here on the homestead and process and slaughter them here on it and stuff. And I'll put some footage in of that because it was a really awesome experience for us as far as learning the whole process of slaughtering through butchering.
Food security for us is not just having a freezer full of food and buckets full of grains, but it's knowing the skills necessary to provide food for our family from pasture all the way to our freezer. So we feel really blessed this year to have had this opportunity and relearn these skills that have been lost over the last few generations.
Our real goal on the homestead is to eventually get to the point where we're processing 100% of our animals ourselves for multiple reasons. One, it brings us closer to the process and where our food comes from. Number two, one of the large parts of raising and putting meat on your table is the cost actually of processing them and having someone else do it. So part of that is taking back that power and taking that cost out of it for ourselves. What we do when we have a pig processed is we do get our bacon smoked and cured, which is really makes it that much more yummy, but it's really one of the few things we have smoked. We do our ham hocks as well, because in the meals that we like to do the ham hocks with, which are these things over here, and stuff, we like them to be smoked. But our hams themselves, we don't, because we can use them in a lot of other recipes that other than just ham steaks. Beyond that, we just basically do a lot of the standard cuts. We do a lot of ground pork that we use, but again, we don't have someone else season it, mainly because we want to control what's going into the pork itself. And as we make recipes, we'll kind of explain how we do our seasonings with our pork. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward as far as cuts, from country style pork ribs to pork chops, to basically some type of shoulder steaks, and then hams themselves and fresh hams. So now really the goal is to get it down into the freezer, put away, and then we'll keep a couple of things up for this week's meals. One of them is going to be some ground pork for a pretty simple and easy meal that we do, which is basically potatoes and pork, which we really like. And we'll probably keep a ham up so we can turn it into a pork stew. But let's get it all down into the freezer. Watch out, smokes.
So we got all the pork into the freezer. It's fairly organized. We have all our back fat and leaf lard available for rendering, and all of our bacon, and we have our hams in the back, mostly used for stew meat. As Sam said, we don't get those smoked. A lot of ground pork, which we season ourselves, a lot of pork chops, and then we have the hocks, and then we just have a lot of various steaks And then we have our country style ribs, and then just what they're calling St. Louis style ribs. We have a lot of our beef in here also, which we buy from a local farmer. We don't raise beef yet, but then we also have a lot of roasts and steaks. So that's a year's worth of pork for us. Again, that was 1.5 pigs, not really full size. Ideally, they would have went another month and a half, but we took advantage of the butcher when he could get here, so we could also learn how to do this process ourselves. But we also raise our own chickens, and we purchase either lamb or beef from a local farmer. And next year we'll be getting our own lamb because we are getting the ram next week. The pork is now defrosted, and now we're going to start putting together a simple skillet dinner. Sam's down in the root cellar getting some potatoes that we grew this year, and basically all the ingredients come from the homestead. There are no directions for this recipe. We just sort of take what we have, usually 1 onion, a pound of ground pork, some greens that we have in the garden. Tonight we're going to do some kale and a little Swiss chard. And then could be fresh garlic. We like to use garlic scape powder that we make from the scapes in the spring.
A little salt, pepper, paprika. For seasoning on the pork, what we normally do is, because we like to season it all ourselves, for this one we're going to do a spicy Italian sausage. So we do use some maple syrup. We don't really measure a ton of stuff, but I think it would call for about a tablespoon of maple syrup. We do some pepper flakes, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon, depending, I guess, on how hot you like it. Some fennel seeds, again, about a teaspoon. And then salt and pepper. Again, about half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. Ideally, we would be seasoning the pork first thing in the morning, but we also find that it doesn't make that big of a difference flavor-wise if you don't get it all defrosted in time. Just make it work. And obviously, you got to mix it all together. So good, clean hands and. These potatoes are new for us this year. They're a Baltic rose. I don't know if you can see. They're basically a yellow fleshed potato on the inside. We're finding that the yellow fleshed potatoes, like the Nicola we grow and these Baltic rose, are really our favorites. And we find that storage-wise, they're about the same as the other ones, like Katahdins and different ones. But they're much more flavorful, more like kind of buttery and creamy. So like we said, what we like to use is the garlic scape powder instead of garlic powder because it's from our gardens. Even though it is a little green, I'm hoping you can see that. It's kind of cool. And a little paprika. And then it's just going to go right in the oven.
We just toss a little olive oil right on top of the greens, lightly coat them, and salt. And then quickly massage it in so all the pieces are coated. And then we'll just wait for the potatoes to be pretty much done, and then we'll add the pork and the greens.
So it's been roughly about a half hour. I don't know if you can see that. It's nice and brown and the little onion bits and stuff are nice and crispy. So just usually like to give it a nice little stir. Make room for the sausage. Now on this we basically just make sausage patties. Once you have all the patties in, we take the greens and we just kind of sprinkle them on top, and then as they cook, they're going to actually turn into like kale and Swiss chard type chips, like you have like kale chips. And we'll put it right back in the oven, and we'll just keep an eye on it for like another 10-15 minutes and keep checking it to see when everything's done. Looks like it's done. Nice simple skillet meal. As you can see, it's nice and crispy as far as the greens. But thank you for joining us on the homestead, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video.